Hello, and thank you for tuning in to the Flatirons Syndicate Motorsports Podcast. This show is brought to you by Flatirons Tuning, your source for any aftermarket or OEM Subaru parts. Be sure to check out our store at flatironstuning.com and stay tuned with Flatirons Tuning.
All right, let's try this again. All right, so welcome back, everybody. This is episode number 52 of the Flatirons Syndicate Motorsports Podcast. We have got Scotty in the shop here. Dusix has joined us again, and we have another guest with us, Mike Pettiford from Go For It Racing. So the inspiration for this episode and for bringing Mike on is actually a couple episodes ago, we had a topic which was, it's not your car, it's you. And we got a lot of comments on that. And the reason we wanted to make that video or the inspiration for that video is just kind of to shed a little bit of light on the often overlooked fact that you as the driver have a lot of effect on what a car does, how the car drives, a lot of the behaviors of the car because of how you put the input into the car, how you use the car. Because it seems like that's something that can be overlooked, can be missed as a part of the equation. And I didn't want to just leave that kind of concept out there hanging. I figured we needed to come back and kind of offer some hope. So what I wanted to do with this episode is to talk about driving instruction. You know, what is driving instruction? And that's where I wanted to bring Mike back on, because Mike, you have got a little bit of experience as a driving instructor. And Dusix, I'm glad to have you on the podcast as well, because you've been starting to do more and more driving instruction as well. So maybe just as a start,
he's what we call a really cool newbie into the fold.
That's right. That's right. You're not fully established until you've got a decade under your belt. Is that
yeah,
about right?
I'm in my first decade.
That's right. That's right. So maybe Mike, could you talk about just what is driving instruction in the context of driving at the track or driving a car at speed?
Well, I mean, what we do, and the reason that I started the company is I was dissatisfied with most other schools or forms or methodology of instruction that I came across. I found out, and when I started my company 36 years ago, we did things differently. I kind of did it the way everybody else did it. And I noticed that people would only get to a certain level and then they stayed there. And regardless of how many like group schools I put on, they would only get to a place and then they wouldn't really go beyond that. And that was not acceptable to me. So that's when we started to do more one-on-one instruction. That's when I really started looking at the methodology and the way that we communicate and interact with the people, because we teach such a wide variety of clients. I mean, we do cars, we do motorcycles, we do trucks, we do buses, we do RVs, we do driver education, we do old people evaluations. Am I still okay to drive? And special cases, brain injuries, and just, we just do a lot of stuff. So yeah. I noticed that I was getting much better results doing one-on-one or very small groups than I ever did in a group formatted class. So what we try to do is bring the person's standards up to what is possible or acceptable. If it's a safety item, like if you're just driving on the street, we want you to know that what your grandfather's grandfather taught you may not be the best thing to do currently. And that's news to a lot of people. So, I mean, we try to be at the leading edge of all of those things. And of course, on the racetrack, you can, is it you or is it the car? I'm sorry I missed that episode. That would have been a good one.
well, now is yes.
I hope you guys keenly missed me on that, because I certainly would have had a couple of things to say.
Well, we definitely broke some hearts.
Yeah,
I'm sure.
Our own included.
Yes.
Uh-huh.
But it's, we try to isolate it and then give the student the next step. And that's what I've always thought was unique about my particular business, is the way we do what we do. And, the results that we've gotten over and over and over really speak for themselves.
Sure. Well, and I think that, so would you say, like, kind of to go back a little bit at the beginning, or even now for a lot of driving schools, would you say that like the norm would be training in groups, like groups of people, and having like one instructor for, say, like maybe multiple students, where they're like the instruction takes place by and large, say, like at a whiteboard or a chalkboard, and then people are sent loose into a car to kind of like drive around on their own. Would you say that that's kind of the norm at this point?
Yeah, I mean, the format for most group schools, I mean, including when we do a group school, like we just did a huge corporate charity event where we had 140 people a day. And that's
Wow.
exactly what we did. Did we teach those people to become better drivers? Absolutely not. What we did
Yeah.
was let them have a good time and keep them safe, and hopefully they didn't hurt my cars.
Right.
Because in that big of a group, you really cannot do the level of interactive instruction that actually works, in my opinion.
To get to a very high level, like you really need to have that one-on-one.
The problem is intellectual knowledge transfer is not learning it. You can understand it intellectually. You can talk about it at parties and social events and still not be able to actually do it.
Sure.
That would be the difference.
It's having an understanding of a concept versus actually executing it and experiencing it, to have kind of the physical experience and understanding of what that concept actually translates into.
Right, because you have to be able to do it. That's,
yeah.
In my view, that's what the task is. If we were just talking about it, we could talk about a number of things that are not life-threatening, and it doesn't matter. I mean, we can talk about nuclear physics. I'll be able to understand a little bit of it and regurgitate it back to you until it comes time to solve a problem.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And then I will have the deer in the headlight look on my face, because I will have no idea how to do it actually, even though we've discussed it. And for a moment in time, I thought I did understand it. So that's the difference.
Right. Now, so Dussex, what is your take on it? Because you've kind of started to come in with the instruction, I think more under the framework of NASA. I don't know if you'd agree with that. But
In
Grid Life. So what is your take on what you do, or what can be done, or what information can be doled out, from you as an instructor?
So like I totally agree with Mike. I mean, one of the big upsides of like say NASA HPDE1 or like Grid Life beginners and stuff is that you do get that one-on-one or at least one-on-two focus with your instructor. I do a lot of lead follows these days, and I'm not a big fan of lead follows, but when I do like my own private instruction, when you're in the car with somebody, I mean, you can make those corrections like real time and live time. And it's so hard. I mean, it's so hard to do that with 10 people at once, much less one person from your own vehicle in a lead follow situation. Like that's what's common with Grid Life. But when you have, the smaller that grouping is, and especially when it's one-on-one, I mean, people can process it like actively, and it happens almost instantaneously, and it's a better value even for them, I think, too. Even if it costs more up front, you don't have to wait 20 minutes to figure out what it is that you did right or wrong, and then have to hold on to that and then go back out and try to apply it again. And that's kind of how it is with Grid Life and with NASA. But definitely that one-on-one, I mean, it translates so much faster to how quickly they can pick something up, and how long they don't hold on to like the negative things that they're doing, like how people brake, how people turn in, and things like that. Getting those key points and those visual elements and stuff like that. I mean, you can literally call that stuff out like real time. And when it's tough when you're doing it, looking at from a sight tower.
Right.
Or I mean, at Road America, we had like computers. There's like 16 mini screens across 3 giant big screens, and it's not refreshing as fast as people are missing apexes, So it's and half the time you can barely tell, is that a red S2000 or an orange Corvette? Like it's it's tough. But when you're in a car, if not everybody's comfortable with it, and I get that, but when you're in a car with somebody, you can fix those problems right away, and have those conversations, and then go back out and do it again.
Like pointing out a bad habit,
exactly,
trying to break a bad habit as it's happening. You see what you just did? Don't do that again. Here's why. That's not the way to do it.
It's funny is that people don't even realize that they're doing stuff too. Like I talk about it all the time where people like pull their sleeves up, on the straight stretches and keep going. I was like, why? Can we just tape those things down? Like, why, what's going on with those things?
Right.
And they don't realize some of those things are a distraction to the driving, but it does take away from that focus and that concentration.
Or Scotty, the joke is, you know how you were just driving? Well, don't drive like that anymore.
Yeah. Everything you're doing is wrong. Yes. As long as you don't do any of that anymore, you'll be much better. Well, and so basically what it comes down to, I think bad habits and showing what is possible is kind of the core root of driving instruction. But Mike, we've had this conversation a few times where there's kind of a barrier to get people to even open up to the idea of instruction, because there's just like I'm doing as I'm driving this car as fast as it could possibly go. Like if I'm doing a 2 minute and 25-second lap in this car, like that's it. I have extracted all of the performance of this car. And so there's not maybe this openness to pointers or to information about bad habits, or I guess the best way to put it is that is definitely a barrier to instruction. I don't know how much you've run into that, or if you're just tired of talking about how much you've run into it. But I think
I run into it daily. I mean, very, very few people. I mean, the people that ask for instructions, basically there's three types of people, okay? There's the people that want to be the absolute best and like win or be safe or whatever it is. And those people will get instructions right off the bat, okay? Those are the most intelligent people that I deal with.
Because they're open to the suggestion. They're open to the notion that they're not.
No, not to put anybody down, but they get it. In other words, they understand that there are things that they don't know about this venue. Just like when I call somebody up for the computer, I know very little about computers. There are people that know tons about computers, and I am never going to be one of those people, even with instruction.
Got it.
But the awareness. So those people, they will call me right away, and we will get it done in a very short period of time. Championships, again, my results speak for themselves. Then there are people on the other side. They've had crash after crash after crash. They've spent every bit of money they can on the car, and it's still not fast. And the only thing left is them. And they're not going to call me right away.
Right.
They'll probably have to do another couple of crashes, but finally they will say, okay, doggone it, I'm going to check it out. And then the third and final group is just somebody that says, look, you should see Mike.
Okay.
You should just call him. Just call him. We've heard enough excuses. Just call him.
Well, and I think that we've talked a lot about something seat time on this podcast and for various different topics where like, okay, the first obstacle, if you're going to try and drive your car at the track, is to get your car to the track and then drive it, because that in and of itself can be a barrier. I mean, I'll point this finger at myself. It's been a couple of years now since I've driven at speed, so I get that. So that's the first part. But we've talked a lot about needing more seat time. But I wonder if part of that is just this perception that like, okay, well, at some point, like if you just, all right, I drive at the track once a year, I'm going to move it. So I'm going to do it. Like I'm going to do 8 track days this year. So I should be way faster by the end of this year because I'm going out to the track so much more because I'm going to get a lot more seat time.
Well, allow me to clear up this misconception. Seat time is not what makes you fast. Sequence is what makes you fast. And the example that I always give, every morning I sing in the shower. Every single morning there is a concert going on. I am not getting any better. And it's not because I'm not practicing, because I am, but I'm not getting any better. It is not seat time. All seat time does is get you comfortable with the same mistakes that you're used to making. Now,
that is the trap. That is definitely the trap.
Yes, indeed. You do need to practice. And yes, practice is technically seat time. So I will stipulate that before the other two jump on my back and start beating me over the head.
I mean, we talked about why it's so important to get it done early, get an instruction done early, if it's just, even if it's just an initial consultation, because why so many people will just continue to work on the same bad habits and they don't even know it, like turning into earlier. I mean, braking is a big one, not braking appropriately and stuff. And man, it's really easy to beat those bad sequences and after a whole year of open lapping when you could have fixed that like in your second or third day,
It takes much longer to unlearn a bad habit than it does to learn the right habit, because you have to unlearn what you're not doing properly.
Or you'll have a driver that their driving sequence is incorrect and they're trying to physically get the car to accept that driving sequence. And the car is never going to do it, no matter how much camber or whatever they do, until that part of their driving sequence is corrected. And I've seen it over and over.
And that was the inspiration for the previous topic, where you have this bad habit that's creating, let's just blanket understeer. Like the car is understeering. The car will not turn in. That is the problem. So the core cause of the problem could very easily be how you as the driver are giving input to the car. Either for the speed that you're trying to get the car to go through the corner, the way that you're giving the steering input, who knows? But instead of addressing the input, you address the parts of the setup of the car. And so you keep trying to pile parts on or change setup to correct it to get the car to do what you think it should be able to do. And if you finally achieve the goal and get the car to do what you want it to do, you still have that bad habit that was creating or a lion's share of the problem initially. So then that can have all sorts of ramifications down the road, because now the car turns in fine, but maybe corner exit's terrible, or the car is really, really slow because you've had to you change the setup, you put on a lot of stuff that has a lot of negative effects on the overall speed of the car, but just to kind of put the bumpers on the lanes to get it so that it will do the one thing that you want it to do, that thought was the issue. So that's kind of the worst case scenario, but the thing that I think you have to be aware of, or at least aware that there's that possibility. Like if you think that the car is deficient in a way, it's like, well, is it the car or is it you? And it's a lot easier and a lot more common that it's driver input versus the car entirely. So that's if there's anybody that's listening, the kind of the goal of this is to kind of maybe break down some of these barriers for reaching out and finding instruction. And that would be the first one, is to try and suss out and be aware that it could be what you're doing with the car that's creating the problem in the first place.
There's also the buddy system too, right? I mean, if you get one-on-one instruction, it's not like Mike from a whole group of people and he doesn't know who you are, or Ryan from a whole group of people and he doesn't know who you are. You get one-on-one instruction. Sometimes you got like an email or like a phone number you can reach out, like, hey, like I've been doing all the stuff that you suggest and I really see my lap times go, insert compliment. I wonder what you have an opinion on what these kind of tires or what I should do next for brakes, and then maybe, as a valuable instructor, you say, hey, keep working on those things because I know you have more potential there. But if you're really considering doing this, here's this, this, and this. I mean, driving instruction doesn't always it doesn't just necessarily end all the time with, that conversation or that day that you paid for. Sometimes those are relationships you're building. And, some people have to pay to have friends like me. So what's the big deal if you're paying to have a driving instructor friend?
Yeah.
But ultimately, that's I think that's one of the biggest things that I think people think about, that driving instruction as a one-day interaction. And for a lot of people it is, but it's a tool in that toolbox as well, just like anything else.
Well, and I think so. That's one of the other questions I want to ask. Who can benefit from driving instruction? Is it just the newbie that, like, you've only been to the track a couple of times and you just need a little bit of guidance and then that's it? Or is it maybe a broader group of drivers than that?
Well, anybody that wants to be at the top of their game. I mean, I've hired instructors, to show me. This is at High Plains Raceway, which I know better than most people. And I had a guy come out and beat my time in my own car. So there you have it. And I bowed at the end of the lesson, and it was very expensive because I used my cars. And I told him, look, if you wad them up in a ball, do it. I want to see it, and I want to see it all. And I saw it all.
Because this was not long ago, if I remember right. This is in your Corvette, and this is maybe, like, what do you think, in the last 5 or 6 years?
Oh, it was I think it was 3 years ago. I took both of them out, and the guy's very familiar with them. And I taught him the track on Saturday because he had never been to that track. And those of you that think it's seat time, I had way, way, way more seat time than him at that track. Sure. It was not seat time.
Yeah. Just skills.
and at that point, Mike, so I mean,
it was sequence. That's what it was. Yeah. And that's what I wanted to improve upon. And that's what I did. Yeah.
So, and at that point, I mean, so Mike, you've won some championships, just a couple. And in that car.
That's what I've heard. And
at that track.
Ryan doesn't think that I beat anybody. He just thinks that I run around and pick up trophies, but that's not exactly.
Dang,
there's a lot to a championship. There's a lot to a championship. But the key point here is, Mike, is like you've been successful in that car at that track, but you still had an inkling that, like, I don't know that I am going as fast, even all of that experience and being the fastest guy in the class and winning out there. You're still like, I don't know that I'm going as fast as I could go in this car. I'm going to bring in this hot shoe that I know is fast. Oh, yeah. I want to see what he can do, and I want to try and have him give me some pointers, like point to where I can improve, where there's more time that I'm not utilizing and getting with the car.
Well, and Mike, that's the thing. How many top level racers? I mean, when I hired this guy, I currently had the lap record. I had won that class the last 16 years in a row. So you would think that if I was a normal egotistical racer, I would think that I'm the man. Nobody can go faster than me. But I was not the man, and I know that. And I don't. Yeah, I'm pretty good at what I do. I'm not. Lewis Hamilton could come down here and kick my butt in a whatever I put him in. I'm pretty sure of that. So the thirst to get better and better and better is what I find lacking in today's group of people as opposed to 20 years ago. And it's kind of sad.
Yeah, so that range of people, I mean, basically driving instruction is it's especially helpful when you get started, but it's helpful along the entire process. And you might not have the same instructor. You might have kind of a more novice intermediate level instructor like me. And then if you really want to take your skills to the next level, you've got Mike that takes you to, that championship winning skills. I don't have any championships or class record or track records. But I do have a winning smile and a long beard. And sometimes that's you need that. And
like we said, there's a lot to winning championships.
Yeah. And to answer your question, John, I think everybody could benefit from driving instruction in their entire driving career or their entire drive. I mean, and they're going to be people who I don't even know if they realize they give up. And that's kind of like what Mike's saying is, like, if you want to be the top of your game, there's opportunity there to even be better. And there's a lot of people like, I am at the top of my game, And that's already admitting defeat right there. I mean, even Mike openly says, I know I have opportunities. Let's bring in somebody who can show me those opportunities. You're not going to you can't give up,
Right.
And so I think that's a good way to look at it.
You can never assume that you have gone as fast as you could go, that you have gone as fast as that car can go, because unless like you're trading Lewis Hamilton or you're set up to replace Lewis Hamilton, there's probably more time that can be pulled out of that car or out of the driving.
Mm-hmm.
Scotty, it sounded like you had something you wanted to chime in.
I forgot.
Forgot. All right. Well,
no, actually. So, Mike, what did you learn from that guy that you weren't doing? What was different in his sequence than yours?
Well, he was using a lot more curb than I was, and we
using more of the track.
Yeah, and we discussed that because we did lead follow. I rode with. We switched Corvettes. We did this all day long. We did it on video, data. We went over data. You couldn't have walked away with more information than I had.
Okay.
And the difference that I found was he used a lot more curbs, and his budget was a lot bigger than mine.
Using the consumables more aggressively.
Yep, because in his world, the car only has to finish that race, and then they tear it down and put all new stuff. And I'm just not in that price bracket, and I'm going the wrong direction to get there.
Right. But still eye-opening, and still, a lot of valuable data was gained, it sounds like.
Yeah. What I was hoping was that I would see something that I would go, oh my gosh, I've never seen that before. That's amazing.
Yeah.
I would never be able to do that. I didn't come away with that, but it was very educational, and I would do it again.
Now,
Sure.
Now, full disclosure, Mike and I have had this conversation before, and Mike, I'm glad you told that story, because I was throwing that softball up there in the hopes that you would tell that story. So thank you. But the reason that I wanted to kind of hopefully get to this point is to really underline the fact that there's almost always going to be something, if not a lot, that you could learn as a driver from good instruction. No matter what your level, no matter how successful you've been to a point, there's always going to be something that you could gain. And Mike, that story is a perfect example of it. And that's, I think, another one of those things, just like what you were saying, Dusix, that is maybe a misconception about driving instruction and how beneficial it can be. It's not something you just need a little bit of a nudge at the beginning, and then you're off to the races and you're going to win and everything's going to be fine. It is something that you might well need instruction as long as you're driving. If you really want to be at the top of your game as fast as you can be, there's always going to be refinements in your driving, refinements in your technique, refinements in your sequence that will help you improve, help you be faster.
Well, and so on that story that Mike just told, you were hoping that you were going to come away with something that was just like, oh my God, I didn't know that was possible type of thing. Where, Mike, you actually gave John some instruction at Pueblo. It's been about 45 years now.
I think it was actually about 50 years ago. Yes.
First customer, 36 years ago.
That's right. I don't want to date myself, but it's been a little while.
But I remember John telling that story of Mike, you driving John's car, and John being like, I didn't know that my car would do that. And
yeah.
And that's a pretty interesting thing of just like, somebody who gets out there, they're driving on the track. This is what my car does. And then you put somebody in the car that maybe has a better sequence, to use Mike's words, or just understands like braking points, apexes, things like that. And like, oh, holy shit, this car can actually do that. Like, you have no idea what your car is actually capable of until you actually see somebody else do it.
And ideally with you in the passenger seat.
Right,
Mm-hmm.
right. To actually scare you and be like, oh, I can't believe that actually worked.
I would argue that was all right. So that was my introduction to Mike. We were this is probably over a decade ago at this point, but we were doing some track day events that Mike was putting on, and so at the end of the day, he's like, and it's a track that I had driven at a number of times. Hey, Mike, all right, let me ride along with you, kind of like you're same motivation, Mike, but from a much lower level. And so the gap there between my driving and your driving was much higher. And it was, basically it was 2 laps of, oh my God, I can't believe the car is doing this. And we're not like spinning off. And it was eye-opening to say the least. And I would say if you're thinking that you're at the top of your game, but there's somebody that is in a similar car or a driver that's much faster than you, if you can get them to drive your car and ride alongside them, that might well be, especially an instructor, somebody that has a lot of experience in driving a lot of different cars and is fast, that can be amazingly eye-opening, because oftentimes you think that the limit of the car is here and that you're right there. And actually it's more like this, usually,
Yeah. You get out of screen.
Yeah, off the screen.
And the other thing is teaching is a separate skill. There's plenty of people that can go fast in a car, and I've seen it over and over. It's like, okay, let me drive your car, watch me go fast. Now, did you get it? Okay, watch me go fast again. Did you get it? Well, that's not instruction, that's demonstration. Sure. And there's a difference. So, what I try to do with students, I don't show people how fast I can actually go, because all that would serve to do would be for them to say, well, I'm not ever going to be able to do that. Mm-hmm. But I'll go a second faster than they are, and they'll go, well, I can do that. And if there's 10 seconds, then we do it step by step. And that's where I feel humbly that I'm a master at this, because I see so many people that just can't teach, and they're in the sport and they want to give back, and it feels good when you do it. I get that, but some of them are disseminating misinformation, and so it goes. I mean, there's a driver education company that I won't mention because I don't know where this is going to go, but I should pay them money because they mistrain so many people, and they end up coming to me afterwards. I should just pay them monthly.
Well, so
referrals. Here's your referral royalties. Thank you.
I actually have
no one. Yeah, present company accepted. Yeah. No, I'm not.
So if you that is a very valid point, and if you're interested in this, you're seeking out instruction, and you sit down, you do a session with somebody or a couple sessions with somebody, and it just isn't clicking with you, like just like what to your point, Mike, there's a big part of driving instruction that is communication. So if you feel like you're not understanding what the instructor is saying, or you feel like the communication is just not quite there, I'd say that would be a reasonable indicator. Like, okay, we'll try and talk to somebody else. Try and find somebody that you click with, that communicates with you better. But to your point, Mike, I actually have a story that's relevant that happened with a customer. This was a long time ago, but basically, and relevant also to the "it's not the car, it's you" question. So he comes into the counter. He's like, "I have a new WRX. I took it to the track. It understeers like crazy. I have to fix it. So he came in with a list of parts, and I was like, okay, well, I mean, how bad is this understeer? Like, you've got a long list of parts here. What's going on?" And he's like, yeah, I mean, basically, it will not turn at all. Like the car basically just wants to go straight. I was like, well, that's interesting. I mean, I've driven these cars. I'd say that they will turn in a bit. Talk to the guy a little bit more, and come to find out, well, he went out to a Porsche track day because he has a buddy that's in the Porsche club, and he was an instructor. Okay, perfect. So you're driving at the track with this Porsche instructor, and he's giving you pointers. So where, like, does he say that the car understeers? Like, oh yeah, like he says that the car understeers like crazy. Like, okay, interesting. So then I talk more about what he's doing with the car. Let's say it's his sequence. And basically, to make a long story short, the guy who was the instructor drove a 911. The 911s, as everybody that's listening to this podcast knows, are just wrong. They're built wrong. They're a horrible engineering mistake because they put the engine in the wrong place. Somehow they got confused. The engine wasn't in front. They put it in back. But by doing it that way, there's the physics model of the way a 911 works, because of where the engine is, because of where the weight is unique to that platform because, again, it's wrong. Porsche people can write in, but I'm right. This guy, who was an instructor and had a lot of experience driving a 911, was trying to get this novice to drive his WRX like a 911. So basically, his sequence was hit the brakes, turn in, mash the throttle, like full throttle immediately on turn in, and he wonders why the car doesn't go. Now, this is a case where the instruction was not optimal, but it was because the car that the instructor had all of his experience and his sequence was based on was a unique one, and he didn't understand how unique that platform was, and was trying to get this person that was a novice to use a WRX the way that you would drive a 911, and that created this big disconnect. So that, just to your point, like there can be bad instruction, and that's, I would say, is an indicator. Like if you just feel like it's not working, if you feel like the communication just isn't there, go and try and find another instructor, because it's worth it. If you really want to improve, it's worth finding somebody that has the experience and can communicate properly to really help you improve your driving.
So John, was this customer, you're talking about him buying a whole bunch of parts, was he trying to buy an 818? Because that's like, I got a WRX. I drove a Porsche guy.
I will date myself again.
Drive.
No, this was a long time ago. This is actually before the 818 existed. Like this is probably early on, and I mean, I didn't maybe do as good a job as I could have, but basically he did not want to listen to what I had to say, and so I ended up just selling him the set of sway bars that he wanted, and I don't think I ever saw the guy again. So maybe that's my fault.
And he's still understeering somewhere out there to this day.
I'm pretty sure of that. The other thing, and this is kind of one of my pet peeves, is if you call yourself an instructor, then you should be adaptable. Mm-hmm. If you only drive Porsche cars and that's only what you want to do, okay, I'm cool with that. Stick to that. But don't think that you're what I call a real instructor, because you can put me in anything. It doesn't matter whether I like it. That's why we do so much stuff: cars, motorcycles, trucks, buses, RVs. Put me behind anything with wheels and whatever, and in pretty short order, I will figure it out. Why? Because I'm a real instructor, and that's what we are able to do. Okay.
Well, and there's actually a key point there, Mike, which is that you also have this understanding that you as the driver, you as the pilot of this vehicle, have a lot of control of what it does. And so you know that, hey, I can give this car input a lot of different ways. And if I'm driving a 911, I give input this way, and that's what makes the car fast. If I'm driving a Corvette, it's a different platform. I change my input, I change my sequence, and that makes this car fast. And which basically underlines the point that we were at previously, which is like that's how much of an effect you as the driver can have on the platform. And it's knowing that and adapting yourself and adapting your input. That's how you can hop from one platform to the next and be quick. But it really makes that point.
Well, and another mistake that some instructors, and I'll use that term loosely, make is they try to get the student to drive like them. Mm-hmm. Now, when I teach somebody, it wouldn't be a bad thing if you drove like Mike Pettiford drove, okay? But if that's not your style of driving, what I want to do is make your style better for you, because you will learn that easier than if I have to change everything so you're doing it exactly like I do it. As long as the car is happy and the laws of physics are happy, I'm delighted.
Yeah. And so I will, having been in that seat, the way that you told that to me is that you are the car interpreter. So So whatever the car is doing, you basically explain, like, okay, I'm going into this corner and the car is understeering, and you will, being in the passenger seat, you have the experience to know, okay, you're going in too fast, you're turning in too early. What are the things that you as the driver are doing that is causing this behavior? So you interpret what you're feeling in the car to say, okay, try and change your input, change your sequence to correct the behavior of what the car is doing. And for me, that was very eye-opening as a driver, because it made me realize that, okay, well, if I'm going into this corner and the car is just understeering right off, I need to fix it in the driver's seat, because like it just, whatever the car is set up at that day, maybe it's the temperature, maybe it's the tires, whatever, it's not going to do what I'm asking it to do. I need to change the way that I'm giving the input to the car to get it to do what I need it to do on that day. So realizing that you have that ability, that is something you as a driver can do, that's really powerful. And that's one of the things that I think is missing, or can be missing, as far as a perception is people as they're trying to develop their driving, just like we've been talking about.
Well, and the other thing is, and probably stereotypically, the super expensive car guys are the worst. They think if they paid $250,000 for the car ought to do whatever the heck they tell it to. And sorry, the laws of physics are not impressed. There's certain things that cars just will not ever do. And one of them is accelerate more and turn more when you're at the limit at the same time. That will never happen in anybody's lifetime. Okay.
Yep. Well, and it's once you realize that, and if you can take it in, that the biggest thing for me was all of a sudden, like the benefit to me was all of a sudden, I'm not overusing the car. I stopped, really wearing out my tires quickly and going through brakes as fast, because I was not trying to force the car to do something that was just like on the limit of physics for it to do.
You were fighting with the car, and no driver has ever won a fight with a car ever in the history of driving. So there you go.
Yes. But that if you take anything away from this to encourage you to go and get some instruction, I think that would be the thing, is like to get a better understanding of when a car is not doing something that you want, the clues for what you as a driver could be doing. Because it's one thing to say that you have to be aware that what you're doing as a driver could be creating this behavior, but to really get some instruction and figure out what those inputs are that are not correct or not optimal, that are creating this behavior that's causing the issue. I mean, that can be really enlightening.
Well, and it's important to change the perspective or the perception of the person. We get this with driver education all the time. A lot of people that follow too closely think that they're following perfectly normally. And these people are like typically a second behind you, and the minimum's 2 seconds. If you're in an SUV or a pickup truck, it's 3 seconds. If you're towing a trailer, it's way more than that. But for them, it's perfectly normal to follow that closely. And until they have a rear end collision, I'm not going to see them. They're not going to call me typically, unless they have some scary stuff happen to them.
Yeah. Well, and the same thing can happen at the track as well, where like if you're just pushing the car beyond its limits in some aspect, and you're having issues, and like you could feel, I could see where somebody could feel unsafe driving at the track just because it feels like the car's inconsistent, or you just cannot keep the car on the track or something like that. That would be a good indicator to kind of reevaluate how you're using the car.
Or here's another one, and I've seen this at the track so many times. You get somebody that cannot consistently hit apexes. So the car is doing something different every lap, and they're trying to tune the car to go faster when the car is not doing the same thing. Or they'll try and set the car up with old tires, or with, if you're going to set the car up, you got to take it to the limit. And the limit's got to be with fresh tires and the way that you're going to normally race the car on race day. Otherwise, it won't work. And I've seen people take a perfectly good race car and just drive it into the ground and go slower at the end of the day and burn up tires and brakes and rotors because they don't know how to test a car.
Or set it up. Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, we help with that because, again, I'm adaptable, and I'll set the car up for you to go faster, not for me to go faster. And we take notes and, okay, this is as fast as the car goes, but the client gets in and says, oh, that's way too much oversteer. So we set it up for as fast as they can go with it the way they like it. And then they're going to go fast and be consistent because the car is their friend instead of the car being intimidating to them.
One of the key things you mentioned there is consistency. Like, saying, okay, well, if you're doing something different with the car every lap, if you're not lapping with the car consistently, you can't really change the setup because you're not using the car. You're not going around each corner the same way every single time. You're flipping the coin. You're rolling the dice every single time you go into a corner. Would you agree that if there's a lot of uncertainty as you're driving around a track, like if you don't know, this is my entry point, this is my apex, this is my exit, and you're not able to consistently hit that on, let's say, the majority of corners for a track every single time, if it still feels uncertain, that would be an indicator that there's some inconsistencies in how you're using the car, or maybe that would be something to focus on first and foremost, just finding that consistent line so that you're doing it every time, and there's less surprises with each lap.
Well, or what I say is, a lot of people say, I believe it when I see it. Okay, you've heard that 100 times. Well, in driving to the limit, you will only get there when you believe it. If you don't believe the car can brake at the 3, it's not going to brake at the 3, or you can brake at the 3, but you'll brake at the 3 in fear, and your braking sequence will not be correct because you don't believe it. And that makes a huge difference. I mean, I've seen it over and over and over. Or people that have to summon their courage to go fast. That's not the way you do it. I'm sorry. You don't have to bring your gonads in a separate tractor trailer to go fast. That is not necessary.
Would you say that it's fair that if you have a good sequence, going really fast is not terrifying?
Oh, I would go further to say it's almost effortless. Now that would be an oversimplification because there is definitely some intensity to going fast. So I don't want to minimize it too much. But in order to go fast, and anybody that's taken my class, you've got to have 3 things. You've got to have proper line, you've got to have intensity, and you've got to have feel. If you don't have any one of those things, you can go kind of fast, but you're not going to be able to go to the limit of the car. And if you want to win races, there's 4 things. You've got to be fast, you've got to have the right car, you've got to be consistent, and you've got to have good racecraft. And it's always been like that. This is not something that I just came up with. It's always been like that.
And the racecraft is probably the hardest of those things to learn because you really have to get in the seat and do it to figure out, like, how do you get around a guy? If you're faster than the car ahead of you, how do you get around him? It's not as easy as it might seem.
Well, and for those who don't really care about wheel-to-wheel racing, I would say what are the biggest things there for, say somebody like me, because like racecraft is not anything that I honestly care about, but the feel. You said that word.
That's not true, but we'll come back to that.
Well, so the feel of the car, you have to like feel what the car is doing, and that is something that, like, I mean, we've referred to it as the butt dyno. Like, what is the car doing? Like, you can follow somebody and see that as they're going around a corner, or braking, that the car is actually bouncing and hopping. And there are people who don't even know that their car is bouncing and hopping and going around a corner because their suspension is set up so poorly. Or even like understeer. They don't feel that the car's understeering in certain spots, but you can actually see it. And that's one of those things that instruction would help with, is somebody to point out what the car's doing that they may not even feel that it's doing. Your car is actually bouncing going around this corner. What do you mean? And then that it comes back to proper setup, but the not knowing what you don't know. Some people just don't know what they don't know. And my butt dyno is still being refined and tuned pretty much every time I'm on the track. What was that feeling? Wait a minute, what the hell was the car doing? You know, and then trying to actually figure it out.
Yeah, but for instance, like I remember before you put in the diff, you were hearing that noise when you were going around. I think it was turn 3 at High Plains, and you couldn't figure out what turn 2. Couldn't figure out what the noise was, but you knew you heard it. You couldn't figure out what it was. Now it ended up being that you were spinning a tire,
right?
But it was there was a lot of kind of, you heard the noise and you could kind of see, or I think we could hear it on some of the video. So there was some trial and error before we realized exactly what it was. But yeah, it's just little indicators in the driver's seat. Like if there's something that stands out to you, it's like, well, that sound is weird. The car feels weird here. That is something worth pursuing. And
honestly, that was one of those things of, I think somebody was standing out on the corner of turn 2 and they were just like, yeah, you're lifting that rear wheel. And I didn't know I was lifting the rear wheel, but once that was brought up, that was just, oh, okay, that's
Torsen
what I'm
doing
feeling.
Torsen things.
Yeah,
Right.
Torsen doing Torsen things. There it is.
Yep.
Yeah, that feel. I mean, I think that'd be something huge that you could learn from instruction of, like, what the car is actually doing. That like somebody who's just getting into this probably has no idea of things like that.
Trying to help them, give them tools to translate the feels and the sounds that they do hear or they do feel. Like, is my steering wheel doing this a bad thing? Like, it's just a track. Is my car trying to fly off the track on the front or the back stretch of High Plains? Like, that's just a track. Is my wheel doing this? Like, yeah, now that's bad.
Yeah.
that's
Every time I hit the brakes,
that's
the steering wheel does this. Okay, that's yes, stop
Yeah,
immediately.
and that the vocabulary, my car's doing this, and like building up the vocabulary of what the car is actually doing. Yeah,
and the experience base. I mean, it's having some instruction can allow you to build up that vocabulary and that experience base much more quickly, and getting past that hurdle. I mean, that can be getting past that hurdle quickly can really get you to the point where you're progressing as a driver much more quickly versus just kind of having a lot more just kind of mysteries in the car as far as why it's handling the way it does, why it's doing what it does, and just trying to kind of figure out a way to drive around it. You can get stuck there.
Mm-hmm. So Mike, I know you wanted to say something about the racecraft. I know it's just killing you right now.
Well, what I was going to say, two things. First of all, the reason that I absolutely love racing is racecraft. I mean, going fast is cool, but you can do that anywhere. If you're next to me on the merge lane and the light turns green, watch what's going to happen. Okay. So that's fun, but in a closed environment and doing it for, 25, 35 an hour, 2 hours, that's why I do what I do. And the reason I say you like racecraft is because I've seen you, when you pass somebody, I see a smile. That's racecraft, my friend.
Yeah, but
I mean, racecraft.
Ahead,
there's a racecraft that applies to endurance racing and to wheel, like sprint racing. I mean, even in time trials or time attack, since it's a cool buzzword, there's racecraft in it. Like, I've got to have my mind's got to be turned on lap 1. I got to make sure my tires are where I need them to be. I need to set my car up this way. Like, there is a racecraft. Sure, it's not for position, like who's going to cross the finish line first in time trials, but you don't just go out there like on open lapping day. You know, you don't just go out there and just drive and like, oh, cool, I hit a fast time. Even when guys are going out for their qualifying laps, it's what tire pressures are my car is my car at? You know, is my suspension dialed in right away? I'm going to go out low on fuel. F1 cars, especially for a long time, they had the special cheaty. Do I have my cheaty tires? Do I have my cheaty tune? Do I have my cheaty arrow? Do I have my cheaty driver? You know, and there's still a racecraft to it. It's not the same as it's not exactly the same as sprint racing or endurance racing, but they can all be the same. I mean, that's what makes it all fun, because they have their own personality, you know?
Right.
Like, I love endurance racing, and sometimes I'll get into my Subaru and start driving, and I'm like, what am I doing? Like, I'm treating it like I'm in an endurance race where I'm going to be in the seat for 2 hours. Like, I got 6 minutes to get this done, you know?
Yeah.
See, and that racecraft of like, you know, learning how to pass somebody, learning how to set up a pass in a corner, like that's, I don't know. I mean, maybe eventually I'll actually, you know, do an endurance race or do a wheel to wheel, something like that. And I'll wish I'd paid more attention or learned some actual racecraft. And at that point, maybe I will look for instruction on that. But usually if I'm passing somebody, I'm not trying to set up a pass into a corner. It's set up on the next straight, like that racecraft of like wheel to wheel for position. You know, usually when I'm passing somebody, it's because they're in a faster car like a Corvette and they're slower than me, and you get out on the straight and they mash the throttle and they won't let you by on a straight, and then you get in the corners and you're all over them. You know, and so it's like just to get past that person, trying to figure out like, how can I set this up so I can get past this person, as opposed to, you know, taking a hot lap or a hot pit pass, you know, just to get more distance.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and then in you guys' situation, the racecraft is to set it up so that you can get a one super fast lap without any impedances whatsoever. So spacing, everything you just said, you know, tire pressure, all of that, of course, focus, of course, but it's just to get the one lap. That's the focus or the object of the racecraft.
Right.
So,
And
to an extent, it's having the ability to drive the car as close to its limit as possible, so that you can be faster than the guy in a car that maybe makes 200 horsepower more than you, but doesn't have the setup, that doesn't have that time attack racecraft to extract the same time out of that car as you're able to extract out of your car.
And again, what I would call that is qualifying. And we do that, but then we race, and that's fine.
And I'm sure you'd agree, Mike. There's separate disciplines. You have to qualify successfully to be able to race successfully, and you have to be able to race successfully to be able to qualify separately. But they're kind of two different disciplines, or they're related but different.
Well, and nowadays it's much more specific. You know, 30 years ago, people that were doing autocross wanted to be road racers, but maybe they couldn't afford it. Now there's people that do autocross or time attack. They don't ever want to be road racers. They just want to do that. And that's kind of new. And it's cool. You know, it's fine.
I think that, like, if you wonder if you like driving enough to the point where it is worth putting forth the effort to develop your skills, to develop your craft so that you can go faster, it is if you found some element of, let's call it racecraft for this point. If it's finding a way to get around a guy ahead of you, if it's finding a way to extract the maximum amount of time, if it's finding a way to make a car be as fast as it can, but over a 2-hour time limit in an endurance race. If there's some part of being in the car on the track that is just gets under your skin, that aspect of racecraft, that is the indicator. If you can't stop thinking about it, that is the indicator that you should explore that. You should follow that passion and continue to seek out whatever information or input you can to develop your craft and to get faster, to get better at it.
Well, and for me, and I've told you this story, John, you know, when I was a teenager, I still had, super intensity, and I didn't know about racing. So I got lots of tickets. If you cut me off on the highway, pal, I would be teaching you a lesson. I was that stupid and I was that arrogant. Road racing lets me do all that, and it's all legal, my friend.
Yep.
And that's kind of cool.
Well, and there's something to be said for, like, man, if you really want to drive fast, the track is the place to do it, because being able to do it in an environment where you can really explore the limit, push the limit, and there's no social ramifications, let's say, for doing that there's a real benefit. And man, a properly designed racetrack is really going to be a lot more fun than even like the best stretch of mountain road, because they don't set roads up for the public the way that they set up racetracks. Maybe a corner or two, but again, there's a lot of potential ramifications to exploring those individual corners out there. Being at a proper racetrack and being able to really push and be able to explore those limits, it's a lot more fun than having all those extra superfluous worries because of the location.
Well, and again, for me, I mean, it's really been my savior, because now you can cut me off on the highway and that's okay with me. It's I'm not gonna teach you a lesson. You do you and I'll do me, and we'll both get there. And that's all I need to do on the street.
For me, every time I get done with the track day, driving home is just like, oh, I'm 10 miles an hour under. Oh, sorry, didn't even realize it. Just like, yeah, whatever. This is boring. The track, that's where all the fun and the speed and the excitement is.
Yeah, I'm just driving the RV thinking about the next track.
Yep. Yep. Well, and just, I mean, it's such a fun environment to try and develop those skills. And I don't know, would you agree with this, that there's very little of the driving that you would do day to day, just driving to and from work, the grocery store, whatever, that is actually applicable to driving at the track?
I don't know about that. I mean, I'm teaching a teenager now that just bought a Scion 86, a Subaru BRZ.
Yep.
And it's a 6-speed, and you can't have more enthusiasm than this guy has. And he's learning it step by step. And, as you're merging on the highway, if you've only got 200 horsepower and you've got to get up to 75 miles an hour on I-25, you can use max power and shift it 7,400 RPM quickly. And that's the exact same technique as on the track. If you're in an emergency, a kid jumps out in front of your car and you do threshold braking with a downshift and a swerve, that's the exact same technique that you would use on a track for a different purpose. So again, some of it is identical. It's just the intention or the purpose is different.
Okay. But definitely, like, as far as exploring the limits of grip and cornering speed, I think that a little bit of a difference there.
Well, but this is coming from Mike Pettiford, who shows up, in his daily driver on Hoosier R7s. I drive around on R7s all the time. No big deal.
Why not? Why not?
What?
What? Right?
What's your point? I don't get it.
You've got to become eminently familiar with what those tires behave like at every possible tire temperature. Yes.
Are you guys ready for the thread hijack?
You've never seen me once in a snowstorm with R7s on.
Yeah.
Well,
I did
actually,
once.
I think I did
not
too.
Not that I haven't done it, but my point is you've never seen me.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure, like, me and John both remember this. It was either just started to snow, or maybe it just started to snow. It was the day after it snowed. Either way, the ground was still wet and you were on R7s. I remember.
Yep.
I remember this, Mike.
All right, Ryan, hijack the thread. What were you going to say?
All right. So there's all these new tools out there for data and trying to go faster, like the Garmin Catalyst, the Apex 360. That also has like a teledoc line of drivers that can review your information. Of course, HP tuners and all this other stuff. Do you guys think that they will ever truly replace real live instruction.
No, I think it'll help, but I don't think it'll ever replace it.
Well, I think it'll take business away because a lot of people will think that there's no difference. And you know, and I've had that, you know, well, I've got data. Well, data will tell you what and when. Data will never tell you how, and that's what I do.
Yeah, I was a good friend of mine, Robin Dillon. She's been doing time trials and running with the Porsche Club and with NASA and stuff. And she has a Garmin Catalyst, and she was telling me, it tells me in my ear what to do. Like, it's talking to me all the time and stuff like that. I was like, oh, that's cool. You know, and I started going over their information, and the Garmin Catalyst can only compile data or information based on what they're already doing. So they're driving poor lines. It's going to go off of like, this is your best of the poor lines. It doesn't tell you that. And then there's not that intensity. I rode with her at Pueblo earlier this year, and I was like, go. I was like, down. I was like, brake, blah, 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 you know, and there's kind of like that excitement and then like the edge of having somebody in the car. She's like, oh my God, that was so much. Like, I had no idea that was so much better. And it was so like, and because the Garmin doesn't just yell at you. There's lots of high pitched, big smiling, bearded dude, you know, throwing his hands up in the air and shit, you know, and it was kind of funny because for a lot of people, I think you have items like the Garmin 360 or whatever it's called, the Garmin Catalyst, where it's like, well, it's telling me what I'm doing wrong and it's helping me focus on what to do on sections and blah, blah, blah. It's like, there's nothing, like, you cannot beat the real deal. You know, it's like, it's not even the manual versus PDK argument. It's like the driving instruction versus, you know, the robot that's dropping your fries behind the counter at McDonald's. Like, it's just never going to get better than the real deal, you know?
Well,
so it's pretty interesting.
The other thing about data, and I mean, I've worked with data when we were doing pro racing and World Challenge. You don't get a lot of practice. So all you really get a chance to do is go over data. There's been data that has been acquired from my cars that didn't accurately represent what the car did. I've had this conversation with SCCA. They put data boxes in my cars for years and years. And what they say, what the data box has said is that solstices don't corner and that they out accelerate other cars. And in the T4 class, that's just never been true, but that's what the data says. So, I mean, the best place to use data is when you've got 4 super drivers all driving the same car on the same track, and they can look at it and everybody can get a piece of what the other driver's doing better, and everybody's at a level that they can instantaneously change their technique. Then data is absolutely magic. But if you're 10 seconds off the limit of the car and you're using data, I think you're going up the wrong tree.
And I think, I mean, even the quality of data, I mean, we talk about it, Scotty and I mean, we talked about, you know, not only about having phone mounts that are proper but external GPSs and all those other things, just so that you can get the most accurate information out of the data, because you can have data that's not that accurate and it can be pointing you in the wrong direction as well. I mean, being able to like smartly interpret information and not try and do too much with it too. I get that a lot where people are really focusing on, and the Garmin Catalyst, I feel like, is guilty of it. They're really trying to focus on one corner or one thing that they're trying to fix, but it doesn't really show you what effect it's going to have, you know, mastering that one corner, what it's going to change down the line or in the next sector or whatever. And so I personally think that, you know, data is excellent, especially, you know, for guys like me and Scotty in that intermediate level, teaching other people how to use it, comparing and seeing what we can do and verifying changes that we've made. But for a lot of people who are still like in the beginner range, I feel like the data is almost detrimental because sometimes it's reinforcing bad habits. It's definitely not talking about it, you know, and some people, I mean, some of it's expensive, you know, $1,000 for the Garmin Catalyst, which is only using information based on what you're doing and nothing else, you know.
Well, the thing you have to be aware of with data is the processor, like the Garmin Catalyst, only has the data that you give it. Like if it is only looking at GPS input as far as acceleration, deceleration, and GPS location, and I don't know if it's accurate within, a foot or 2 feet. You have to be aware of what data you're giving this calculator, and only trust it to be as accurate based on the data that you're giving it. So like, is it going to be able to tell you that you're actually getting up to the limit of traction of the tires or not? Probably not. It probably doesn't know. I mean, it might be able to tell you that you're cornering with more speed or with more G-force in this corner than before, but it can't tell you if like, okay, well, you're at 1.6 Gs if you go to 1.7, or like, listen to the tires squeal, or do you see how you're having to give it a lot more steering input? You're getting close to that limit. If you go faster, you might have an issue. It can't tell you that.
Yeah, there's not like a drop down for a selector tire. R7, click.
Right. Well, and it doesn't know what camber setting or what suspension you have on it, or heck, maybe even what car you have. Is it front wheel drive, rear wheel drive, or all wheel drive? Like, just be aware that the data is limited by the data that you give it and the data that it can collect.
Well, yeah, and Ryan, you said it best. I mean, it doesn't know the difference. If the maximum that you corner is a half a G and you could be cornering at 1 G, all it will know is a half a G. And that's a disservice.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, and I think, again, it comes back to my point. Like, even if you're using data, and I think it's a good starting point. It's good to have an idea of a lap time is a good piece of information to have. And like, because again, like we were talking about consistency. If you don't have a little bit of a baseline as far as, well, what lap times are you doing? You don't know if you're consistent or not. I mean, if you're doing like 225, 215, 220, and 206, like what happened? I don't know, but you've got to go back and think about, okay, well, there's traffic, and then I took the shortcut at the top of the track. So that's where I saved about 30 seconds. You've got to be able to think about what you're doing to give you to generate this number, and then like if you've got like the Track Addict or whatever that's giving you like information maybe per corner, think back to that lap and what was going on, what gave you those times.
Well, and data's just a tool, so if you have data from before you go and take driving instruction, then you have data from after you took driving instruction. Yeah. Then those are two things that you can compare that will be very viable. What was my top speed on the straight here? Okay, well, I was 10 miles an hour faster after I took driving instruction, and that's because of a better line through the previous corner. It has nothing to do, like the top speed doesn't really tell you why your top speed was there, but comparing old data versus new data.
Yeah. And the data probably can't tell you, hey, yours the way that you took corner 3 was better, which was faster, and coming out of turn 3 5 miles an hour faster, that's what let you be faster on the straight. But the data is probably not going to tell you all that because it just doesn't know.
Well, and the other thing in your example before, John, if you did a 210 and then a 208 and then you did a 206 and then your next lap was a 208, you scared yourself.
Could be.
It wasn't like, okay, I got it. It was like, oh my gosh, I'm never going to do that again. And now you're back where you were.
Hopefully not, but it certainly could be. Could be.
Happened.
Well, and the worst one was, I remember I was riding with Scotty at one point. This was a few years ago, and you were. I don't know, it's just a ride along for whatever reason at the track. I can't remember, but you were recording it, and it ended up being the first time that you did. I think it was a 202 or a 201 at High Plains, and I was riding with you, and it didn't feel spectacular. It wasn't like, wow, the afterburners were on for that one. We came off, and you're looking at it, and you're like, that's weird. It says I did a this. And I looked at it, I was like, yeah, that's weird too. And looked back like, no, that really happened. How'd you do it?
Oh,
I don't know. That's the worst, where you've got the data point. They're like, well, you did it. Well, how? No idea. But that's where like an instructor in the car might have been able to say, well, you did this, something.
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, it's not a mystery. It's not magic. It's always physics 101. I mean, it's always that. There's really no mysteries on the racetrack. I mean,
Shouldn't be.
places, but not on the racetrack.
And I would argue that there really shouldn't be.
I want to say that same weekend, it might have been that same weekend, I ended up giving Mike a ride in my car and went four-wheeling off of the outside of turn 7.
That might have been, yeah.
And that's what I had an instructor being like, I'm like, I thought I had that. He's like, oh no, buddy, you didn't have that at all. You turned in way too early.
Yeah.
You think
And
the
if I
guy
remember right,
tells you that?
He's
Oh,
like,
buddy, what was that?
in fact,
I remember.
Scotty,
I remember from the second you turned in that it was going to be fucking wrong, and I remember reaching for the shit handle.
yep, I remember that story because you saw Mike grab the handle and you're like, why is he doing that? And then he went 4 wheels off.
Yeah, if I'm riding in the car,
Yep.
if I'm riding in the car with you, that's not a good sign because I don't scare easily.
Oh, man. Well, we've been going for a little bit, so I want to kind of wrap this up. But as we're doing that, first, Mike, thanks for setting aside the time and coming on and chatting with us.
Hey, my pleasure.
But
Always a pleasure.
is there
to be
anything?
with you guys.
Yeah, anything you guys would suggest is for somebody that maybe is on the fence or after hearing this conversation is thinking, okay, maybe I do need to seek out somebody to try and get some instruction. Anything you'd tell them either to kind of break down that barrier to reach out, or to kind of give somebody that's interested that final nudge to make them hopefully reach out and try and get some instruction.
You're not as cool as you think you are. You're not as good as you think you are.
No, Scotty, not to me, to the people that are watching.
Oh, sorry, John. No, same.
Oh, okay. Oh, sorry.
I mean, I think everybody could benefit from instruction. I think I could benefit from instruction. Mike's been trying to get me to take instruction from him for the better part of 7 years now, Mike. And I keep telling you that I can barely afford tires to go to the track, much less pay you to tell me how to drive faster. But one of these days, man, one of these days, I'll give you some money. You can show me how to drive faster.
I think, and I think maybe that's the key caveat, because I feel like that was the thing when I saw like the Syrian school is $400 at for a half day. I'm like, oh my god, that's obscene. It gets down to the point where especially if you're starting out at this, there's so many. Every time you go to a track, or every time you put new tires in your car and go to the track, or every track day that you do, just know that money you spent initially, and then the money you continue to spend and invest with instruction, is going to save you money and materials. It's going to save you time, because you're going to be seeing results faster. I mean, it's going to save you, so many other things. And it's kind of like having a personal trainer, right? Like, you might just be stuck at 30 pounds. Like, oh yeah, I'm finally getting it. But their personal trainer is going to push you to 50 and push you to 60 and push you to 70. That's what kind of cars are like. Anything like that. It's a mental challenge, it's a physical challenge, and then there's all the costs associated with it. That $400 or more, or whatever it costs to get that private instruction from Pettiford or whoever, is going to pay for itself if you're committed on doing it. If you just want to, I got this 918 Spider, I just want to go do something wild with it. Then just go do something wild with it. But if you think that, okay, I got bit by the bug, I need something. How do I do this proper? And I would recommend that money, that initial investment, is going to pay for itself easily.
It will save you money in the long run. It will save you money in the long run. And
you'll see results faster, and you'll want to do it, and you'll just continue to drive you harder. I'm like, God, you know what? I've hit a plateau. Hey, Pettiford, what are you doing this weekend? And it just it keeps building and keeps building. And it's just like that at the gym. People think about it as steroids, except it's legal. No one's going to judge you. I would love to see that. It's like, well, yeah, but you were trained by Pettiford, or you were trained by Ryan. Your results aren't fair. No one's going to say that at the track. People are like, hey, what kind of juice are you on?
Yeah.
They're going to want to know. They're going to know,
The craft is the craft. Learning to drive fast, learning the craft of driving is the craft of driving. And
and the other thing is, and this happens so many times, setting priorities on what you spend the money on. If you're spending the money on getting your car faster and you're not hitting turn-in apexes and exits, that is money wasted initially because your car is never going to go fast unless it's got a fast driver. And it's always been like that. The other thing is, I mean, we do vehicle counseling. It's like, okay, do I want to start with a Porsche 911 and I'm working at, you know, Kmart in the frozen food section and my
Hell
credit's
yeah.
not that good?
Oh.
Probably not, because your racing career is going to be very short. So, you know, trying to not have people make the same mistakes that I've made over and over and over because I didn't know any better, to have somebody tell you, no, you don't need to have 50 more horsepower when you're 20 seconds off what the car will do on the track.
Right.
That's not the best expenditure of money.
And knowing that you're working on your craft and you're improving your craft, it ensures that whatever you're doing with the car and whatever modifications you might make with the car down the road, you're going to be able to fully get the benefit for all of those modifications and
Absolutely.
changes, because
Yep.
you're improving your craft, you're improving your driving ability. And I would say that, like, it's fun to go out to the track and drive. That is definitely fun. And as you improve your craft and you find all these new tools that you can use to drive the car and to go fast, and you improve that craft, it becomes even more fun. And then you find the
Yeah.
racecraft element that is like, that gets under your skin. Like with Mike, it's playing that game of chess at 120 miles an hour. Like, I'm going to pass it this time. You're not going to want to let me by, but you're going to have to. Let me show you how. That gets under your skin, and then it becomes even more fun. So
Yeah.
that's the lure. Like, if you can get into it, like that is the lure to really focus and improve. And the word I would say to encourage you to seek out instruction is, if you hit a plateau, and if frustration starts to set in, like, I'm doing 215s and I can't go faster, but all these people out there are blowing my doors off, but I am doing everything that I can and I can't get past this limit. Some instruction can break down that barrier and give you some more tools to use, give you some more understanding of the car to get past that and get back to the point where it's fun to drive again and it's fun to use the
Yeah.
craft again.
Yep.
Because I mean, to me, it's no fun to have a really fast car and get passed by slower cars. I mean, you know, that's, to me, you know, and a lot of people, that's the way they live their life. I was out on the track, and everybody's got stories like this, but this was a particular ridiculous one for me. I'm in my normally aspirated Solstice that turns like a 206 with everything new out there. And I'm passing a guy in a turbo Porsche. And he comes up to me and he goes, "Man, that's a fast car." And I just start laughing, because
Yep.
my top speed on the straightaway is like 102. His top speed on the straightaway is like 150. And
Yep.
come on now.
Now, and see,
And
Mike,
Scotty, you say you don't like racecraft. You would love doing that, my friend. You would love it.
he does. That
Yeah,
is
he
the
does.
lure. As much as it is not fun to have a really fast car that's getting dusted by slower cars, it's really fun to hone your craft and be in a slow car
That's right.
and dust really fast cars. The grin that Scotty had when he had a picture where he was ahead of and holding off two Vipers in his STI.
Oh yeah,
Yeah, that was a pretty
that was
cool
a
thing.
moment. That's right.
Yeah. Yeah. Cool. Well, we've gone on here, so I think it is as good a time as any to wrap this up. So just want to thank you again, Mike, for the time, Dussex for joining us, Scotty for sitting up front, and yeah. So thanks very much for everybody for listening, for sticking around to the end, and as always, until next time, stay tuned with Flatirons Tuning.
See you guys.
Thanks everyone for tuning in to the Flatirons Syndicate Motorsports Podcast. Once again, we'd like to let you know that your support is what makes this show possible. Be sure to check out our online store at flatirons.com for any of your aftermarket or OEM Subaru parts needs. And as always, stay tuned with Flatirons Tuning.